IVM.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Racheta.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project.
We have as our guest today Siddharth Banerjee, author of Speechless. In this episode, we deep dive into his book, what inspired him to write, and the key difference between logic and magic.
In the second half, we also discussed Factfullness by Hans Rosling, What I Talk About When I Talk About Running by Haruki Murakami, and The Hero and The Outlaw by Margaret Mark and Carol Pearson.
Siddharth discusses how to prepare an engaging and strategic talk and hone your power of public speaking, mental biases that obstruct our thinking, clearly structured systems that all business and marketing professionals should follow, and how running was the major source of inspiration for Murakami and his writing.
Happy listening.
In the ancient Greek and Roman times, there used to be the 4 R's. The 4 R's which were essential skills which used to make people effective and powerful. We perhaps know the first 3 R's, which are reading, writing and arithmetic, but there is the 4th R which over ages, over time, might have got lost, might not get the prominence that it deserves. And the 4th R is rhetoric, the art of conveying an idea effectively. We were inspired by the idea of rhetoric, by the concept of having the power to communicate an idea effectively, which could be for any situation in your lives. It could be a one-to-one conversation where you are pitching to a potential love partner. It could be a pitch that you are making to a venture capitalist. It could be a business presentation, or it could be a public speech that you are giving to an audience of 200. Whatever is the situation in your life, we think that communicating your ideas effectively is a superpower. Hence, born out of this particular fascination, Roshan Abbas and I, Siddharth Banerjee, wrote this book called Speechless, which we would like to present to the world.
Thank you, Siddharth Banerjee. That was the context of the book Speechless, written by him as well as Roshan Abbas. We'll be right back after this to discuss the book in further detail.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa, the show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have. Paisa is brought to you by Paytm Money.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project. My name is Satyajit, otherwise known as Onion Knight in most food circles. I'm hosting this podcast with my partner Racheta Sharma.
Hi guys, my name is Racheta and I'm an ex-banker who gave up my banking profession to follow my passion and run libraries across the world. The Open Library Project is a non-fiction book library service offered to businesses on a subscription basis. We're trying to move away from the run-of-the-mill library concept by setting up locational and rotational curated libraries across co-working spaces, corporates and business incubators. The idea here is to create value, build a knowledge community and encourage a growth mindset amongst our members.
Today we have with us on the show Siddharth Banerjee, corporate leader, best-selling author and public speaker. Welcome to the show, Siddharth.
Thank you so much.
It's lovely to have you here.
Privilege.
And we can't wait to deep dive into your book. So please do tell us, what inspired you to write the book.
Yeah.
So I think from our school days, both Roshan and I have been inspired by the concept of effective communication of ideas, public speaking, and the ability to communicate an idea effectively. So throughout school, college, grad school, and in our professional lives, we've been public speakers, we've been evangelists of the power of ideas communicated effectively. And so therefore, 2.5 years back, Roshan and I met at a conference where we conducted a workshop on public speaking called Speechless.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay. Wow.
And the workshop was so well received. We, of course, got a standing ovation, which gave us a lot of confidence. We were delighted. We were thrilled. And the workshop gave us an idea that we could perhaps turn the content into a book called Speechless.
Right.
Right. So 2.5 years ago, we all met at this conference, and how long did you all take to go from idea of the book to actually getting down to writing it?
That's absolutely a wonderful question, and which is why I paused. Because while we thought it would be an easy task, the task of actually getting the book in its final form took about 18 months. So as Roshan likes to joke, it's like two babies being produced by somebody. But the reason for that is that both of us run our own hectic lives.
Right.
We used to meet over the weekends, get time for jamming together, coming up with concepts together, looking at which stories suited the point that we were trying to make or the concept that we were trying to elucidate. And so therefore, those weekends became literally our only time that we would jam.
Right.
Okay.
The second thing is that inherently we are both very curious people. So every time we would sit together to write the book, the conversations invariably would meander as well. So they would get on to galati kebabs from Lucknow, to venture capital and PE in Bangalore and Mumbai, to a variety of topics under the sun. And it took some degree of discipline for us to get back onto actually writing the book. Hence it took 18 months, but very enjoyable 18 months.
So did you find it difficult, like, if you're not writing through the week and then you get back to the book at, on Sunday or Saturday, did you find it really difficult to connect, the dots and sort of get the flow right? Or was it
A conversation that
Yeah.
just continued.
Yeah, I think there were both these things happening at the same time, because Roshan and I, on this particular subject, think so much alike. And because this is a subject which is very close to our hearts, we were literally able to carry on the conversation from where we had left it. Having said that, of course, it took us a little bit of discipline to get back onto the original momentum that we had created for ourselves.
right?
So while we used to meet over the weekends, we had a dedicated WhatsApp group where we were constantly pinging ideas to each other in the course of the weeks. We used to have telephone calls whenever there would be a brainwave that would strike us. There is the brilliant Speechless mantra that we devised, which was after the first few months of working together. So I think while the formal catching up used to happen over the weekends, we were literally seized with the idea and building the idea through many, many weeks.
Wow.
That's great.
Sounds fascinating. I think any idea that really takes a hold of your brain, you're not able to let it go out. And if you really start working on it, you can see it to fruition in the soonest time possible.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty and the magic of Speechless, the book.
Yeah.
Because I think we are excited with it because we've been able to do two things, which I think our audience is loving. The first is that we've been able to boil down the concepts into a simple mantra, which is called Speechless.
Right.
And that is something which a lot of people are finding great as a memory hook. They are able to get a sense of how to go about a great idea and communicate it effectively in a systematic way. So that's the first thing that's exciting us. The second thing that's exciting us is that we've been over the journey been able to capture some really great stories and anecdotes.
Yeah, I was just going to get to
Which really make the point very, very well. So some of the concepts have therefore been brought alive in a manner that our audience is being able to relate to and they are loving, and we've got a lot of positive feedback on that.
Okay. You shared a lot of interviews as well that you all did with, people who've been in public speaking for a long time.
Right.
So could you share some of those experiences with us?
I think we are fortunate that the book Speechless has tips and tricks and anecdotes and stories from public speakers like a Harsha Bhogle,
Right.
or a Cyrus, or a Mandira, or a Gaurav, or a Mini. And therefore, I think what that adds to the book are some principles which have been tried and tested by these experts in a variety of public speaking and one-to-one speaking situations. So I think the richness of the book got amplified by having conversations with these experts. The second piece is that it adds a lot of authenticity. So this is not just theory that we are presenting, but we are backing this up with experts who really used some of these principles. And at some times you will see in the book that they're actually talking about things that perhaps we know, but we miss out some of the brilliant basics sometimes. And how then people rally back, speakers rally back. So I think that has been a very interesting part of the book Speechless, which is why we've been kind of encouraging and spreading the word on the book Speechless.
Right.
So the book has like two parts, right? There is magic and logic.
Yeah.
So could you tell us more about, how you all made this segregation and what it stands for?
Absolutely. I think that's another unique feature of Speechless, which is the fact that we recognize that not everybody wants to be an Obama.
Right.
Or for that matter, therefore, an excellent orator. Logic is about being good. Magic is about being great.
Okay.
So logic is about making sure that you are never speechless, which means that you are never in a scenario where you have to present an idea effectively. You are never stuttering, or you are never short of words, or you are never underconfident about presenting an idea. So therefore, that's almost like the brown belt level, if I may use that as an analogy. The magic is little bit going towards from good to great. So the magic is about the fact that can you go on to the next levels and leave your audience speechless? So if the first part was about you should not be left speechless, the magic part is about can you leave your audience speechless with awe, with wonder, with the gift of an idea that you have given them.
So it's like the tipping point of your speech.
That's right. So the way to look at it is that there is like a good level, which is like the brown belt, like I said. And if you are really persistent and if you want to build it into a habit, you can go towards black belt, which is what we are calling the principles of magic in Speechless.
What really stood out for me when I read the book was that just in the index itself, it gave me a structure of how I should be thinking about my public speaking, or how I should structure my talks, or if I do a talk, what I should really point it towards, or the point I'm trying to make. So that was phenomenal. Just when I started reading the book, it just gave me such clarity on how to write my next speech or my next public address. I thought that was phenomenal. And also some of the people you've interviewed for the books, I mean, they are the stalwarts they're the people who have been on our television since we've been growing up for the last 15, 20 years. And just to go through their insight on how they prepare. For example, Minnie Mathur, I think, says that, there's power in pause, or something to that effect, right? You got to command the stage, you got to be able to hold the pause.
Right.
So I found those anecdotes in the interviews, especially when these people are talking about their own experiences, I found them really powerful.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and the funny thing is that when we started on the journey of writing Speechless, we never started with saying that we would do expert interviews.
Right.
Because in all humility, we did consider ourselves as experts because we've been at it for the last 25 plus 20 years, so 45 years of experience.
Of course.
But when we went through the journey, we realized that we had access to some of the best people in the business.
Right.
And that, I think, has added a lot of authenticity as well as a lot of richness to the book. The other piece of Speechless that I must mention is that when you pick up the book, you're seeing it as, it's not a thick tome. It's something which is very friendly, very accessible.
Right.
And we filled it in with a lot of practical exercises that you can do, with some checklists that you can tick off. So we've tried to make it truly DIY. So, and the spirit of the do-it-yourself kind of a book is something that has got appreciated a lot by our readers.
Yeah, it's very easy to connect to, right? And then you can apply it and see if it's working for you or not.
Right.
Another thing I think about public speaking, which I think is very important, is to be able to gauge the response of your audience while you're speaking.
Yes.
So I think that, of course, comes with time. But do you think there is a way of, sort of shifting your speech when you realize that somebody's getting bored, or being more empathetic to just, how your audience is responding to your speech?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. At a logic level,
Yeah.
there are speakers who have the ability to communicate an idea effectively,
Right.
and look at that as a single-minded objective.
Yeah.
But at the magic level, when you are really a speaker who is the kind of speaker who will draw a standing ovation,
Yeah.
that's the kind of speaker who will figure out the temperature of the audience,
Right.
the energy in the room,
Right.
pivot very quickly to saying that maybe these messages are not landing, and so therefore either I make the messages come alive through stories
Yeah.
or through anecdotes, or I move on. I think one of the things that all the experts have said in the interviews that we did with them is that there is no point in belaboring
Yeah.
something.
Right.
If it's not working, move on.
Right.
Because nobody in the audience expects you to actually read out your script.
Yeah.
You are the master of your own destiny and therefore of your own script. And I think that's a very important point that we've tried to illustrate in Speechless, that ultimately it is your narrative,
Yeah.
your authenticity, and the way you do it is entirely upon yourself. And therefore we've told the story of Kapil Sharma,
Right.
Okay.
who is a master
Yeah, yeah.
communicator in his own right.
Right.
But we've said in the book that the reason why he was successful is because he brought his own authenticity, his own way of communicating, and that's why he connected so well with his audience.
Right.
And I think that's what we stress upon. So the two things, if I had to boil down the mantra as well and say what are the two things that definitely you should look at when you are trying to communicate an idea effectively, the two golden rules for me always are context and authenticity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So have you understood the context of what you're talking about, who you're talking about, the context of your topic, etc.? And secondly, authenticity, which is about, do you know your authentic voice?
Yeah.
Can you make sure that what you're saying is ringing with your audience? So context and authenticity. And the whole book, the spine of the book is actually built on this.
Okay. Do you
Right.
think humor is an important aspect in public speaking? Like if you have a line here and there going, making your audience laugh, I think they just reconnect with you at that point.
Yeah. Humor is a very powerful tool. But the caveat that we have said in the book as well is that it's a tool that needs to be wielded with care.
Right.
Because not everyone has the natural ability to wield the tool of humor effectively.
Yeah.
You have to be very respectful of your audience because they're giving you their time and attention.
Of
And so
course.
therefore humor needs to connect, to find common ground rather than to titillate or to disparage.
Yeah.
So therefore it's a very tricky one, but humor done right is a very powerful tool. Hence in our logic and magic construct, we've said that humor can kind of land in the bucket of magic.
Yeah.
When you're elevating your art of communicating an idea effectively.
That's great. That's
Great. So
real wonderful insight.
Before we move on to other books, how did you get to the stage where you decided to write a book? Like, what's your background and how did you even decide that, hey, now we're going to write this book?
So I think a couple of happy coincidences. The first is that Roshan and I hail from the same school, Lamatnia College in Lucknow.
Okay.
We've known each other for a really long time and we've both been passionate about the topic of public speaking.
Right.
We had often spoken about the fact that this is a superpower that we think that we have built over the years for ourselves and it's helped us in our lives. And we wanted to give the gift of this superpower to as many people as possible. However, while talking about the idea, we never actually got down to doing something about it.
Right.
Except of applying it to our own lives. It was only a happy coincidence that at that particular conference 2.5 years ago in Jaipur, where we met, we said we must do a workshop together. Some of our friends egged us on and we did the workshop to some great acclaim. Piyush Pandey was on the audience, Chairman Ogilvy. He gave us a standing ovation as well, some valuable feedback. That again prompted us, gave us some good momentum. And we were able to at least take the shapath, take the vow that we will now finally put this down in a book. Then, of course, I did describe the journey of 18 months.
Right.
It took some degree of discipline, some degree of frustration, but I think we got it together. But I think we've been supported by a lot of our friends who've kind of said it's a great idea.
Right.
We road tested the idea when we did some corporate workshops.
Okay.
That gave us some great confidence that the idea of Speechless was resonating with audiences. And so therefore, in sum total, these happy coincidences came together powerfully in terms of the book Speechless.
Wow.
It's wonderful that you'll have shared this knowledge with everybody, and I'm sure it will be put to great use if somebody actually, implies this in their life. So, yeah.
So we've heard some wonderful feedback from audiences, from people. We get regular WhatsApps, Instagram stories, a lot of comments on our Facebook pages. So I think the response to Speechless has been phenomenal. In fact, we were kind of bowled over because when we launched Speechless, the very next day it was an Amazon bestseller.
Oh, wow.
So that gave us
amazing.
a lot of joy and a lot of momentum to try and do book readings. And we went and spoke on radio shows. We went to some colleges and did some on-ground activations, etc. What again gave us a little bit of joy was that when Speechless broke into the top 10 at Crossword.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a moment under the sun for two first-time authors as well. So I think we've had these moments of joy which have kept the positive energy going.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the journey can be a little exhausting.
Right.
But I think it's been infinitely rewarding for both of us.
Yeah, the rewarding part is...
Yeah. I feel that's constant through many different business ventures. You take the joys and you push those joys to the next level to keep you going, because there's so many downs compared to the highs, right? I'm sure it was the same for you.
Yeah, but we are super passionate about the power of communicating an idea effectively,
right.
And that's why we think that Speechless is a book that actually everyone should buy.
And do you think there'll be a sequel to this book?
I think that's a great question. We've been asked this quite often. So there are two thoughts that we currently have, and we are toying with it. The first is that a lot of feedback has come to look at Speechless in Hindi.
Okay.
And so therefore kind of increase the reader base for it.
Right.
And the second piece has been that the whole idea of the expert interviews has really caught on with a lot of people. And so therefore people have said that because you've been in the corporate world and in the entrepreneurial world for so long,
right.
Can you guys actually look at creating 25 expert interviews into Speechless Part 2?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
So both these thoughts are there. I think, we are toying with both these thoughts, but it'll take another gargantuan Herculean effort maybe to get it done.
We'll look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
On that note, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back after this.
Fantastic.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure that you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So if you guys haven't been checking our Instagram, you should take a look at the audiograms. We're giving you excerpts from different shows. This is available both on our stories and on our feed. Also, we put these audiograms up on Facebook and Twitter as well. So, do kind of keep an eye out for them. You kind of enjoy them, I think. On The Seen and the Unseen, Srinath Raghavan returns to the show, this time to talk about the nitty-gritties about the 1971 war and creation of Bangladesh. Anirudh Kanisetti is back with Season 2 of Echoes of India from the 27th of March. On the first episode of the season, Anirudh is going to start from where he left off, the rise of the Gupta Empire. New episodes are out every Wednesday. It's the season finale of How to Citizen this week, and joining Meghnad and Shreyas is the comedic sensation Kunal Kamra. The chapter they discuss is titled Law and Social Justice, and Kamra shines a light on everything he sees unjust with our justice system. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam's guest is Gaurav Chopra, co-founder of India Lens. He tells you how you can get a good credit score, bring order to your financial life, the different types of loans out there, and more. On Shunya One, Viral Mehta from Pocket Aces joins Shiladitya and me to talk about the growth of digital content. On IVM Likes, Abbas, Janam, Madhuri and Abhineet are joined by debutante Radhika to give out their recommendations and talk about Amazon Prime's latest original series, Made in Heaven. On Dating is Garbage, spoken word artist Aranya Johar is a guest, and she talks about unspoken dating rules and how to spell misogyny and chauvinism on the first date. On Geek Fruit, Jishnu and Dinkar discuss the latest sci-fi short film anthology on Netflix, Love, Death and Robots. And with that, let's continue on with your show.
Welcome back, guys. We still have with us Siddharth Banerjee, author of Speechless. The next book we're going to talk about is what I talk about when I talk about running, by Murakami. So this Murakami, of course, well-known author for all his fiction books that he writes. This is a memoir about him and his running habits and how that has translated to his writing life.
That's right.
So tell us about this book, Siddharth. What stood out about this book for you?
So I think the reason why I resonate with this book very, very strongly is because I am both a struggling writer, a struggling author, and a struggling marathoner.
Okay,
Oh,
wow.
And I think Murakami has brought in his book the trials and tribulations of being an author and a runner at the same time, and how running and writing as two habits are interrelated and correlated and work off each other.
Yeah.
So I think at my life stage where I was attempting to be better at both, this book with its philosophy of saying that how running and writing are two efforts which are similar and so therefore really feed off on each other, struck a very, very, very strong chord with me. I think some of the instances that he describes in the book are things that I can relate to. So, for example, Murakami talks about the fact that he undertook the same marathon run, which many centuries ago was the first epic marathon run, which was actually how the word marathon came into being. Which was the run from Marathon to Athens.
Right.
Except that Murakami did the same run, but from Athens to Marathon. And he talks about how frustrating after a point in time it gets when you're doing these long distance runs, because you're constantly thinking, why exactly are you running and killing yourself?
Right.
And the dominant emotion that he describes in his book after running X number of miles is that he was feeling angry. And he was feeling angry looking at the sheep which was in the fields, munching lazily, looking at him. and Murakami was thinking, why am I running? And so on and so forth. Right. And I could powerfully relate to it because when I was running my first marathon, after the first 30 kilometers, my body had given up.
Right.
So I was actually just running purely on sheer mind power.
Right.
And that mind was screaming to my body that is something wrong with you? Why exactly are you doing it? Why are you running these terrible distances? So I could relate very strongly to that. And so therefore this book holds special fascination for me. But I think the other thing that a lot of people will be able to relate to, and which is why I recommend this book, is because it describes the process of discipline.
Yeah.
The process that if you do any action in your life with contemplation, it can yield insights and nuggets which you might not have thought about.
Right.
So I think it's a very thoughtful book. It's a book that has a lot of insights, and it's a book that certainly should be read by people who want to get a little bit of self-discipline in their lives. Which is why I would strongly recommend Murakami's What I Talk About When I Talk About Running.
You know, the interesting bit, like you just mentioned in the first half, that when it comes to public speaking and the magic factor, it is about, trying to understand what your audience is expecting or how they're receiving your conversation. So very similarly in books also, right? Like this book stands out for you because you can resonate with it, or it, relates to some factors in your life. So it is, sometimes you have to write the book also according to how people will be perceiving it more than just what you want to put out there.
Sure.
So the content is as important as probably, how people will relate to the book.
That's right.
Just like your speech.
That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, that was what was the uniqueness of the combination that Roshan and I brought to the table. Mm-hmm. Roshan is the quintessential artist,
right.
The creative artist, the creative genius.
Right.
And I was able to courtesy the fact that for many, many years, I have been a consumer business person, and so therefore looking at consumer insights and looking at how people resonate with ideas.
Right.
So I was able to maybe pitch it correctly with perhaps the frequency that resonated the most. So I think that's why our Jugalbandi, our combination, I think
was the perfect balance.
Was a winning combination.
Yeah.
Great. The next book that we're moving on to is Factfullness by Hans Rosling. So tell us about this book, Siddharth.
I think it's a mind-blowing book, and the reason for that is because Rosling actually challenges our worldview by the lens of facts.
Right.
In a sense, what Rosling and his co-authors are saying in this book is that a lot of the world that we know today is based on assumptions rather than facts.
Right.
So, for example, we often read news in the media and we think that the world has become rather unsafe. Mm-hmm. But actually, if you were to break it down statistically, the world has actually become safer than it ever has been in human history.
Right.
When we again read about infant mortality or the percentage of women going to primary schools, we tend to think about lower percentages. But Rosling presents a compelling view of the world where, basis statistics, he shows that across countries, low-income countries, middle-income countries, as well as high-income countries, there has been a very steady and encouraging progression of women participating in primary and higher education. So I think he lays out a couple of these facts and alters our worldview of the planet that we live on, basis facts rather than assumptions or noise from the media that sometimes we can succumb to. That's why I think it's a fascinating book, because the premise of it is go check your facts.
Right.
Which has never been true than in today's age, where each one of us should be encouraged to actually fact check.
Right. Every WhatsApp forward, I guess, we must look into it before forwarding it ahead for sure. Because I find that there's a lot of, because social media is so prevalent now and things, it's so much easier to communicate with anyone else. You're just bombarded with all sorts of media, right? And I guess checking the facts would be the first step to knowing what
especially when it comes to the security of the country. So,
right.
That's right. The other piece on Rosling's premise is that he correlates data points very, very well.
Okay.
Because of his background, where he's spent considerable amount of time in Africa, of course Europe, and has been a global traveler, he's able to see the world as a global village. And I think when people talk about the value of traveling and therefore having a macro picture of the world, it comes alive very clearly in Rosling's book.
So before we move on to our next book, there is just a small surprise for our listeners. This book is very closely connected to Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, which we are going to talk about in a surprise episode coming very, very soon.
The last book that we're talking about is The Hero and The Outlaw by Margaret Mark. So what is this book about?
So this book again is one of those books which kind of mind blow you and change your view of the world. This book appeals to me in particular because by training, I've been a marketer. So I have been involved in the process of building businesses, but businesses through consumer insights and businesses through brands. And when you think about a brand, a conventional definition of a brand that we used to grow up on was the fact that a brand is a thought or a perception that exists in consumers' minds.
Right.
But I think what this book adds on is the premise that a brand is something that provides meaning to a person.
Okay.
And when you start thinking about brands like that, then you suddenly see why some brands like Nike and Starbucks, for example, are so powerful.
Right.
Because they offer a certain meaning. Nike, for example, the best performance that you can get. If you're not an athlete, you can always aspire to be one.
Yeah.
Starbucks, the feeling of a third place, the feeling that you're close to community, besides, of course, the coffee. So I think the premise that brands provide meaning is a very, very important part of this book. The other piece, which is very interesting, is that it talks about archetypes.
Yeah.
And different archetypes, which then brands can literally choose as lighthouses or as guidelines to anchor themselves on. Archetypes are essentially the meta themes that run across human behavior. So it can be a saint, it can be a warrior, it can be a hero, etc. It's a little bit like in Hindi movies, we often hear that a specific archetype is boy meet girl, there is a villain, there is some degree of tension, and finally boy girl live happily ever after. The other archetype is there is a mother, she has two sons. By some quirk, the two sons get separated.
Right.
Something happens. One son is a certain
One's a
character.
Cop, one's a robber.
One could be a dacoit, etc.
Right.
So some of these are meta-narratives which play across. So similarly, this particular book talks about archetypes which are consumer archetypes, which then can be applied back to the world of brands and marketing. And I think the value of this book is that there is a lot of research that the authors have done to actually talk about brands which have done these archetypes or stayed true to these archetypes really well and have been successful and sustained success over a long time. And then there are brands which perhaps have not followed some of the core principles of archetypes and have kind of lost their way, but maybe and there are instances where some of them have come back as well. So it's a practitioner's book in a way, especially relevant for audiences who want to learn a little bit more about psychology, consumer insights, brand marketing, and the whole understanding of how humans think and process brands.
Right.
Hence, I find it a very, very fascinating book.
Very nice. There's another book that we discussed. It's called How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen, who is a Harvard professor.
Right.
And he talks about, that when you want to show how well your brand will do in the market, and if you're trying to explain your processes of, how you'll make it work, you should try to compare it with a product which is totally unrelated to your product. So, or your industry, in fact. So he speaks about relating it to a totally third industry and showing how it worked for the brand there, and then relate it to your own brand, which is also very interesting as a concept, because you can show that, no matter what market, this brand identity or this process would work. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I were to anchor this point back to Speechless, the book that we were discussing, Roshan and I feel that it's exactly that. This book is not a book that we would prescribe, for example, for just the corporate people.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not a book that we would say is useful only for students and MBA, aspirants. This book is therefore meant for any category of people who want to convey an idea effectively.
Right.
And so therefore it's equally valid for entrepreneurs. Speechless is equally valid if you want to have a meaningful conversation with a loved one where you have to convey an idea, sell yourself, give a pitch about why she should marry you, etc., etc. So I think
effective communication.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we've said in the book is that we are on a daily basis in the business of pitching and selling ideas in various different situations with various different intensities. I think the principles of Speechless allow you to do that perhaps a little bit more in a systematic way, a little bit more effortlessly. And if you really keep at it with some practice and dedication, it allows you to do it with magic.
Right.
Great.
Would you say it's like how to get from logic to magic in a way?
We would love it if our readers buy Speechless, apply the principles, get really good at logic, and then get really good at magic. Because, and we've said this in the book, and I keep saying it in some of the interviews, the core insight which inspires us as public speakers is that we believe that everyone in life, at some point in time, deserves a standing ovation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if Speechless can help them achieve this once in their lives, I think it's an effort worth it.
I think that's a profound thought.
We should clap to this.
Just for the thought, you should give a standing ovation for that.
Thank you so much.
Anyway, before we end the podcast, I'd just like to ask you about your personal reading habits. Do you prefer digital? Do you prefer physical books? What type of books do you read yourself?
So
fiction included, of course.
So I'm an omnivore. So I read extensively fiction, non-fiction, magazines, back of pamphlets, everything.
Right.
I think reading has been a habit that I've had since school, cultivated since college. With MBA school, the repertoire that got added were business books, business biographies, etc. With corporate life, what got added was a wider view of the world. Right. And other subjects and topics which then I could kind of interrelate with some topics that used to come naturally. So I think the reading habit for me has been vast, diverse and omnivorous. I am an old-fashioned kind of a guy. I like to read my books in paper. My house is overflowing with books. We've run out of book cabinets a long time back. My wife keeps ordering different kinds of bookcases, compact ones, medium ones, and of course the large ones that we have lining our walls. But I think we love the touch of paper and the ability to highlight something, the ability to just put a bookmark, the ability to put a post-it note, to circle something. Some of it, of course, is possible to do even on a Kindle, for example. But like I said, we are a little bit old-fashioned romantics in that sense, and we want to do paper. It's the same for me when it comes to to-do lists. I prefer paper to-do lists rather than electronic to-do lists. And the third part about my reading habit is that I travel quite a lot because of my corporate life, and so therefore every wait at an airport terminal or every flight becomes literally a downtime for me to catch up on my reading.
Right.
So I'm kind of grateful for that, and so therefore there is always a book in my laptop bag.
We're all for paperback.
On that note, we're going to end this episode. Thank you so much, Siddharth Banerjee, for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Speechless is available on Amazon as well as all major bookstores. And big thank you to all our listeners. You can follow the Open Library Project on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook for latest updates on our events. And stay tuned for the next Paperback podcast on IVM Podcasts. Happy reading. You can follow IVM Podcasts on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at IVM Podcasts.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep or lose weight or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
You say jogging, and I'm telling you a story about a man who dated 3 sisters. You say boss, Kurla, and it's about a guy who went out to a party where they were selling beef. This is Anand Sivkumaran, aka The Croc. My show, The Croc's Tales. You give me a word, I'll tell you a story. Words aapke, kahani aapke liye. Do tune in on Monday and Thursday on the IVM website, app, and anywhere you get your podcast from.